Joining us now for the program is Scott Bennett, former U.S. Army psychological warfare officer, joining us from San Francisco, California, and Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol, the U.K. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program here. I guess, Scott, we'll start with you in a overcast Northern California. You hear this young captive, this young lady, deceased now, pleading, and her pleas are falling on deaf ears for her government to strike a deal to get her out. But her government, in turn, what do? They kill scores more Palestinian civilians, including women and children, and do nothing, turn their back completely on an opportunity for a ceasefire to get her out. Your initial thoughts, Scott?
Well, it's very clear to the Israeli people now that Netanyahu has planned to use this entire event and is using it for his own preservation of political power. Before, he was a dead man walking, about to be indicted on various crimes, and then suddenly he has transformed this Palestinian-Israeli genocide, calling it a war, into his endless presidency, and therefore he has to continue to expand the aggression and the conflict and the destruction in order to preserve his power. And that includes triggering a larger conflict between Hezbollah, Iran, and other countries to try and lure the United States into this quagmire of conflict and again continue his political lunatic dictatorship. But this young lady's blood cries out from the ground, cries out for vengeance against Netanyahu, who betrayed his own citizens, betrayed his own people, and will continue betraying and killing his own people. As he has said in the statement, he prefers to conquer and destroy and eliminate every Palestinian man, woman, and child in Gaza than he would save any Israeli citizens. Others have said he hates the Palestinians more than he loves his own people. And the people of Israel need to recognize, unless they overthrow this dictator like Mussolini, they will be destroyed. Their entire state will be destroyed because their homicidal maniac government is waging war against every Muslim nation, and every Muslim nation is coming to the sad conclusion this is a threat to all nations. So it needs to be met with a diplomatic maneuver and a military maneuver at the same time, with countries like Turkey ceasing and desisting all economic ties with Israel. Turkey should not be selling any fuel to Israel, because every item that Turkey sells to Israel is another bomb and bullet that Israel uses to kill innocent women and children. And that goes for every other nation. So every nation should cease and desist any economic ties with Israel and expel them from their diplomatic, consulates, embassies, and passport operations. No nation should recognize any Israeli embassy, consulate, or passport, because they have demonstrated that they are no longer part of the human race, because they are destroying the most innocent of the human race, Palestinian women and children. And finally, the compartmentalization of Gaza. If you recall, we said this way back in December, November, when this started, that Gaza should be broken up into parts that the BRICS nations and the international community steps in and takes control over and leases from Palestine to protect and preserve it and to give it some financial sustenance. And now Israel and Netanyahu obviously is listening to that plan, because they're going in and compartmentalizing and preparing to break up Gaza into other parts. So, you know, we're witnessing the Israelis in their last stage of trying to destroy everything that remains of Gaza, and only the world can stand up and stop it.
Thank you, Scott. Tony, welcome to the conversation, and thanks for your patience there. Now, Tony, Hamas, a voice among many, believes that the Israeli regime, particularly with this cabinet and Benjamin Netanyahu, cares very little, if anything at all, about the fate of these captives. Your initial take on this?
Well, there's a very strange inversion going on with Israel's leadership, because, as Scott's just quite rightly pointed out, the biggest threat to the existence of Israel is actually Benjamin Netanyahu. He's not leading the country, he's actually dragging the country over the cliff. he's probably the most dangerous person in Israel to be in charge right now. And what's you can look at in a maybe even in weeks' time, you might see, particularly with all the economic problems, the country simply collapsing. The United States is obviously feeding a lot of money into Israel to try and keep things going, but this is proving a total disaster. When it comes to the hostages, this is one of the two main aims, let's remind ourselves, set out in October by Netanyahu himself, that they would destroy Hamas. Well, they haven't destroyed Hamas. Hamas is stronger than it's ever been. It's got more recruits, very much like the Irish War that happened here in Northern Ireland, the IRA, when they became under assault by the British Army. Suddenly there were Republicans flocking to join the IRA. The same has happened with Hamas. So that's been a total failure, that war aim. And the war aim number 2 was to release the hostages. Well, what's happened is there have been 1 or 2 released, a few, but most of them have been killed by Netanyahu. So he is a complete disaster. Worse than that, he is the worst person right now, it seems, to lead the Israelis. And when it comes to this whole business of the hostages and negotiations, you have a very simple situation. When Hamas is negotiating with the Israeli government over this, they know that they cannot release hostages unless there is a permanent ceasefire, because then the Israelis will just simply take those hostages back into Israel, have a great public relations victory, a great triumph, and then they'll resume the bombing. And so this has to be associated with a permanent ceasefire. The terms on which this has been negotiated by Netanyahu have been deliberately designed to be absolutely never going to do a deal. So, and this is proved, isn't it, by the fact that the chief negotiator for Hamas was assassinated by Netanyahu and his friends. So, yeah, but there is a lot of positive, of course, because what's happening is these individuals are being increasingly isolated right around the world. We have had nearly 50 demonstrations here just in my city of Bristol now since October the 7th. These are big demonstrations with thousands of people, sometimes hundreds occasionally, but many times, and in central London, 500,000. We have a mass demonstration movement that's been created to defend the Palestinians here in Britain. And not only that, his own people are out on the streets demanding that he go.
Yep, in fact they are. And Scott, why is keeping control of this Philadelphia crossing between Gaza and Egypt, and then keeping the chokehold on that crossing for Netanyahu? You see that there's fractures within his own cabinet and his war cabinet, especially over this very stickler for him. I mean, you're willing to continue to kill women and children in Gaza. You're willing to watch your own soldiers and the captives, your own captives, come home in body bags and continue to apologize to their parents, and to Tony's point, watch 500,000 people marches over their fate. But you're just adamant to hold on to that crossing. Why? Why is it that important for this man? Or is it? Or is this all a big charade?
Remember, Netanyahu is personally going through a drowning man mental breakdown, an emotional breakdown, a form of schizophrenia. He may smile in a white buttoned-up shirt with a tie, but inside he's a nervous wreck, as are many of his cabinet staff and generals, Gantz and others. You've already seen mass resignations. They're going to re-politically orient themselves and probably try and overthrow him. They see him as the Titanic. He's sinking. So there's a nervous breakdown that is happening in a lot of these ranks of the Israeli political, military, diplomatic, and media leadership. And ironically, Haaretz and the media is actually reporting things that no one even discusses in America. No one knows any of this in America, although Americans do not like Netanyahu. So as Tony said, there is a very strange irony and inversion that's happening. But ultimately, there is good news. And I think the world has woken up. They're beginning to reorganize themselves in a BRICS world, which has a non-U.S. tainted mentality. So there's a lot more common sense in the Russian, Iran, China, BRICS, Brazil, India, South Africa. That whole BRICS organization has its own philosophical energy and impulse and direction. And that is serving as a polarity, pulling Egypt and Turkey, Jordan, Syria, Yemen, other nations, all into a totally different direction. And that the gravity of that, I think, is what is shaking Netanyahu and really Israel apart. That's why there's mass demonstrations. The people realize that they cannot survive much longer if they continue this mad dash to war. And I'd say the other thing is information war needs to be amplified even more than the kinetic war. There should be millions upon millions of flyers dropped every week that tells Israelis, if you want to live, leave Israel. If you want to live, close your bank accounts, close your businesses, sell your cars, sell your apartments, sell your homes, get out of university and move somewhere else, because Israel has no future. It has no future under Netanyahu. It has no future under a fanatical Zionist regime. It has no future under fascism. It has no future when there's international war tribunals going to be committed against the war crimes that Netanyahu has done. And every Israeli who doesn't get out and leave will have blood on their hands, and they will also be judged and punished for the sacrifices of the Palestinians in this genocide. So Israel will implode.
Thank you, Scott. We're almost out of time, so I want to allow Tony to get his final thoughts. And you do realize, Tony, that Hamas treats the captives it has in Gaza far better than Palestinians abducted by the Israeli regime in Gaza are being treated once they're taken over to the other side. I mean, Hamas continues to feed and shelter these people while it's watching 1,000-pound bombs land on women and children, shred them apart, tear them apart, and it's patiently waiting for their government to strike a deal and send them home. But your thoughts, because things do not look good with Netanyahu at the helm right now for the captives, for anything on the ground in occupied territories right now.
Yes, but I mean, I have a much more positive message than Scott, I think. Certainly here in Britain, we have, there has been a lot of reporting all day today. 10% of all of the arms licenses today have been suspended by the Foreign Secretary to Israel, by David Lammy, the new Foreign Secretary from the Labour Party. This is brilliant news. It sends a very clear message, doesn't it, to the Israeli Defence Forces. Look, if you carry on down this road, you're going to end up with no arms coming from Britain. And we know that actually there are Israeli firms here that have to apply for British arms licenses to get their arms to Israel. So this is a very clear message to the Israelis. And of course, all of Britain is now looking at this we're sending a very important message, I think, a military message to the Israelis to stop killing innocent people. We've also seen here in Britain arrests of journalists, and also Richard Barnard, who's the one of the founders of Palestine Action, a direct action group who have been smashing up drones being built here in Britain going to Israel. In factories, and also Richard Medhurst and Sarah Williams, two journalists, have been arrested. But if you look at what they've been arrested for, it's highly unlikely that these people are going to be ever convicted. Yes, they may have to go through a trial, maybe, but the fact that this is what the British justice system and the police have been doing to try and sort of send a signal to the Israelis, look, we will try and arrest some people for you. This smacks to me of desperation. These journalists are just getting more attention from this, and of course more and more people are reading the damning things that they've been writing about the actions of the Israelis. So I think it's all going wrong for Netanyahu, actually, and the Israeli Defence Forces and the far-right bloc now running Israel. Everything's going wrong. All we need to do is watch back, I think, and slowly watch them crumble.
Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. Stay safe to both of you. Scott Bennett joining us from San Francisco, California, and Tony Gosling there joining us out of Bristol, the UK. And viewers, this brings us to this conclusion of this segment of your Press TV News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.